June 19, 1944. Eastern Poland, near the outskirts of Lublin. The morning mist still clung to the shattered tree-line, veiling the blackened husks of yesterday's battle. Somewhere in the haze, the rumble of engines rolled like distant thunder. Private James "Jimmy" Callahan, just 21 and barely 3 months in combat, gripped the elevation wheel of his Sherman 75mm gun. His palms were slick with sweat, his heart hammering faster than the tank's idling engine. Inside the cramped turret of Lucky 7, the air was thick with oil, smoke, and the metallic taste of fear. The tank reeked of cordite and sweat. Sergeant Bill Haskins, the commander, crouched beside the open hatch, binoculars pressed to his eyes. "Convoy ahead, looks like panzers and a few half-tracks," Haskins muttered. "All right, Jimmy, lead tank, third in column. Wait for my mark." Callahan steadied the gun's sights. Through the narrow optics, he could see the dark outlines of German armor crawling along a forest road, Panzer IVs flanked by SD, KFZ, 251 half-tracks, supply trucks, and men on motorbikes. The convoy was moving fast, kicking up clouds of dust in the morning light. "They don't know we're here," said the loader, Corporal Eddie Ross, cradling a shell. "One clean shot and will ruin their day." Callahan swallowed hard. This was his first real chance to fire in combat. His hands trembled slightly on the controls. The reticle hovered just above the lead panzer. "Steady, steady," Haskins whispered. The world seemed to narrow to a single breath. Then, Callahan fired. The Sherman's cannon cracked with a deafening roar, shaking the turret. The recoil slammed through his chest as the shell screamed downrange. But even before the smoke cleared, Haskins knew something was off. "Too high, damn it. You aimed too." He didn't finish. The shell arced slightly over the lead tank and struck a truck halfway down the column, a tanker, hidden by the dust and foliage. For half a second, nothing happened. Then, in an instant, the world erupted. A blinding flash tore across the road, followed by a shockwave that flattened trees and hurled debris skyward. The fuel truck detonated like a bomb, sending a geyser of flame hundreds of feet into the air. Within seconds, the inferno spread to nearby panzers, their ammunition cooking off in violent bursts. Fireballs rolled across the convoy line, turning steel into molten wreckage. "Jesus Christ!" Ross yelled, ducking down as the concussion rattled the Sherman's armor. Through the turret periscope, Callahan saw it, the entire German convoy consumed in a roaring sea of fire, black smoke twisting into the morning sky. What had started as a rookie mistake, had become a massacre. Haskins pulled his headset aside, staring out the hatch in disbelief. "Kid, you just blew up half the damn Wehrmacht." Outside, the forest burned. The screams of men and metal merged into one terrible chorus. Callahan sat frozen at the gunner's seat, his breathing ragged, his eyes wide. He hadn't meant to hit that truck. But now, the enemy column was gone, annihilated in one impossible, catastrophic stroke. And as the flames crackled through the trees, the young gunner realized something else. His mistake had just changed the course of the entire battle. The wind carried the stench of burning oil and scorched flesh through the forest. Every breath filled the lungs with smoke. The once green tree-line was now a black silhouette, illuminated by the pulsing orange glow of the inferno that devoured the German convoy. Sergeant Haskins ducked low in the hatch, radio pressed to his ear. The static hissed with distant chatter, voices from nearby tanks and infantry shouting over the chaos. "Red Dog 1 to Lucky 7, report. What the hell just happened out there?" Haskins coughed, shielding his face from the heat rolling off the firestorm. "Red Dog 1, this is Lucky 7. Target destroyed, correction, multiple targets destroyed. Possible secondary explosions from enemy fuel trucks. Over." The radio crackled again, this time with disbelief. "Say again? Did you say fuel trucks?" "Affirmative," Haskins replied. Whole columns gone up like the 4th of July. He looked back at his crew. Ross, the loader, was staring through the side viewport, wide-eyed. The driver, Private Clay Dorn, had both hands clamped on the controls, his knuckles white. You think anyone's walking away from that? Dorn muttered. Outside, the explosions continued, ammunition stores igniting in sequence, sending geysers of flame into the sky. One Panzer turret was hurled 50 feet into the air before landing with a hollow, metallic crash. The ground itself seemed to pulse with each blast. Callahan sat motionless behind his gun sight, the world around him fading to a muffled roar. His ears rang. His stomach churned. He hadn't even meant to hit that truck. He'd been off by maybe 5 feet, a mistake every gunner dreaded, one that usually cost lives. But this time, it had saved them. He looked up at the commander. Sergeant. Haskins cut him off. Don't say a word, kid. Just keep your head straight. We're not out of it yet. Through the swirling smoke, the surviving German vehicles, maybe 2 or 3 at the edge of the column, tried to reverse out of the kill zone. One of them, a Panzer IV, was backing into the ditch, its crew bailing out in panic. Eddie, load AP. Haskins barked. On it. Ross shoved a fresh shell into the breach, slamming it home. Up. Target that Panzer, Jimmy. 800 meters. Make it count. This time, Callahan's aim was steady. He inhaled, exhaled, and squeezed the trigger. The 75mm shell tore through the air and slammed into the German tank's side armor. A bright flash, then silence. The Panzer shuddered, belched smoke, and went still. The loader exhaled, his voice low. Guess lightning does strike twice. But Haskins wasn't smiling. He scanned the burning road again. The entire convoy had been reduced to a wasteland of twisted wrecks, blazing rubber, and shattered men. And yet, far in the distance, movement. Another column. Through the haze, silhouettes of tanks and trucks were approaching from the west, reinforcements, drawn by the massive explosion. Haskins ducked back down. They're coming to find out what the hell happened. We need to move before they get a fix on us. He tapped the driver's shoulder. Dorn, reverse us behind that ridge line, slow and quiet. I don't want them seeing our tracks. The Sherman groaned as it backed away, treads grinding softly over the dirt. Behind them, the forest burned like a furnace, casting their retreating tank in a flickering light. Callahan kept his eyes on the horizon through the periscope, still dazed. The heat shimmered off the metal, and the air inside the Sherman felt suffocating. Sergeant, he finally whispered, did I just blow up a whole convoy? Haskins didn't look back. You did, kid. But don't start thinking it makes you a hero. That kind of luck doesn't come twice. Outside, the flames raged on, a wall of destruction marking where the German spearhead had once been. The rookie mistake had crippled an entire unit, and somewhere beyond that smoke, other Allied forces were already adjusting their advance, unaware that one nervous gunner had just changed their odds. But the battle wasn't over. The Germans were regrouping, and they were angry. The Sherman crept back behind the ridge, its engine rumbling softly under the weight of mud and debris. Smoke drifted low across the field, carrying with it the ghostly echo of explosions fading into the distance. For a few precious minutes, Lucky 7 sat in uneasy silence, the crew trying to make sense of what they'd just done. Then the radio crackled again, breaking the tension. All Allied units in Sector Charlie, be advised, German armor reinforcements moving east from Lublin. Repeat, multiple Panzer IVs and half-tracks en route. Hold positions and prepare for counterattack. Sergeant Haskins swore under his breath. They're coming fast. That explosion must have lit up the whole front. He turned to his crew. We've just poked the hornet's nest, boys. And now every wasp in the forest is headed this way. Ross checked the ammo rack. We're down to 6 AP rounds and 5 He. That's it. Dorn glanced back over his shoulder. Not exactly what I'd call a fair fight. Callahan adjusted the periscope and spotted faint movement through the drifting haze, dark shapes emerging between the trees, advancing in formation. The glint of armor caught the morning light. "Sergeant," he said quietly, "they're spreading out. Looks like a flanking move." Haskins peered through his binoculars. "Smart bastards. They're not charging blind this time." He pulled the radio mic close. "Lucky 7 to Dog Company, German armor closing in, grid reference 6-2 by 9-4. We're pulling back to secondary ridge to cover the line." A burst of static. Then a grim voice replied, "Copy that, Lucky 7. Reinforcements inbound, ETA 15 minutes. Hold the line. 15 minutes. In tank combat, that might as well have been a lifetime." Haskins turned to Callahan. "All right, kid. That mistake of yours bought us one miracle. Let's see if you can make lightning strike twice." They moved into position along a shallow ridge overlooking the scorched road. The ground was littered with twisted wrecks, the aftermath of Callahan's errant shot. Flames still licked at the metal skeletons of panzers, painting the sky in streaks of black and orange. The enemy tanks advanced cautiously now, wary of ambush. Their turrets swept left and right as infantry fanned out on either side. "Hold fire," Haskins whispered. "Let M come closer. We want the first shot to count." The tension in the turret was suffocating. The crew barely breathed. Every sound, the click of a safety, the creak of metal, felt deafening. At 300 yards, Callahan could see the markings on the nearest panzer. He could almost make out the faces of the German crew riding exposed on its hull. "Now," Haskins ordered. The 75mm cannon thundered, and the shot slammed into the lead tank's lower glacis. The panzer shuddered, smoke pouring from its vents as its crew scrambled to bail out. "Good hit," Ross shouted. "She's burning. Reload, AP, next target, 2 o'clock." The second panzer fired back, the shell whistling past Lucky 7's turret and detonating in the dirt behind them. The impact rocked the Sherman violently, showering the crew in dust. "They've got us ranged," Dorn shouted. "Back up 10 meters, Clay, quick." The tank reversed into a shallow depression as Callahan sighted again. His next shot hit a half-track squarely, sending its occupants tumbling into the flames. The smell of diesel and burned rubber filled the air. For 10 brutal minutes, the ridge became a cauldron of noise and fury. The Shermans of Dog Company opened up one by one, their guns flashing through the haze. Explosions lit the treeline as German armor tried to press forward. Through it all, Callahan worked the gun like a man possessed. Each shot landed truer than the last. He no longer flinched, no longer second-guessed. The same trembling hands that had fired at the mistake shot, now moved with precision, cold, methodical, focused. Then, just as it seemed the German advance might falter, a new sound cut through the chaos, the high, piercing whistle of incoming artillery. "Oh no," Ross muttered, "they've got our range now." Shells exploded along the ridge, throwing dirt and shrapnel into the air. One landed close enough to rock Lucky 7 onto its side for a split second before it slammed back down. Haskins grabbed the intercom. "Driver, pull us back behind the treeline, now. We can't stay here." The Sherman lurched backward, treads grinding over shattered branches. Flames and smoke blurred everything. Callahan clung to his sights even as the tank shook around him. Through the smoke, he saw the German armor pushing forward again, cautious but determined, using the burning wrecks as cover. "Sergeant," he called, "they're not stopping. They're coming through the fire." Haskins gritted his teeth. "Then we'll make sure they regret it." He leaned into the radio again. Lucky 7 to all units, enemy closing in. We're falling back to phase line Bravo. Need air support on my mark. The reply came quick, clipped, and cold. Copy that, Lucky 7. P-47s are airborne. Hold for strike coordinates. Haskins smiled grimly. All right, boys. Let's give the flyboys something worth aiming at. Outside, the German line advanced through the inferno, unaware that the same rookie mistake that had destroyed their convoy was about to lead them straight into another disaster. The forest roared with the sound of war, tank engines groaning, machine guns hammering, the air thick with the smell of cordite and burning pine. The ground trembled beneath the weight of advancing armor. Inside Lucky 7, every man was slick with sweat and grime. The confined space had become a furnace, metal walls radiating heat from nearby fires, oxygen thin and bitter. Sergeant Haskins hunched over the radio, his voice steady but urgent. This is Lucky 7, marking target zone with red smoke. Coordinates 6 to 2 by 8 to 9. German armor column advancing east through Forest Road, requesting immediate airstrike. A tense pause. Then a crackling reply. Copy that, Lucky 7. P-47s inbound. ETA, 2 minutes. Haskins lowered the handset, exhaling slowly. 2 minutes, he muttered. Feels like a lifetime. Callahan recentered the turret and scanned the burning road. The Germans were still pressing forward, methodical, determined. A dozen tanks moved through the wreckage of their comrades, treads crunching over twisted steel. Infantry followed, darting from cover to cover. They're using the smoke for concealment, Ross said. Can't see half of them. That's the point, Haskins replied. They think we can't see them either. He grinned, a grim flash of teeth beneath the grime. But the sky sure as hell can. Outside, the distant rumble of aircraft engines began to build, faint at first, then growing louder, closer. Callahan craned his neck toward the open hatch. Through the swirling smoke, he caught sight of dark shapes descending from the clouds. Thunderbolts, he shouted. Here they come. The P-47 Thunderbolts swooped in low, their wings glinting silver in the sunlight as they banked over the forest. Each one carried bombs slung beneath its fuselage and rows of .50 caliber machine guns bristling from its wings. The first pass came like divine wrath. Bombs fell in perfect rhythm, trailing smoke before striking the forest road with deafening impact. The explosions rippled through the German formation, a rolling line of fire and shockwaves. One panzer was flipped completely on its side. Another vanished in a cloud of debris. Fuel trucks ignited again, their contents splashing into the mud and turning it into rivers of flame. The earth shook violently. Inside the Sherman, Callahan and his crew braced against the shock. Holy hell, Dorn whispered. They're tearing them apart. The second wave came moments later, strafing runs that stitched the tree line with gunfire, cutting down infantry as they scattered for cover. The sky rained brass casings and smoke. Callahan watched in awe. The same road that had been a death trap for the Allies an hour ago was now an inferno of German steel and fire. The airstrike didn't just destroy tanks, it shattered the enemy's will. Over the radio, frantic German transmissions bled into their frequency, shouted orders, panicked reports, all drowned by the relentless roar of the thunderbolts. Haskins grinned. Guess your lucky shot's still paying dividends, kid. But Callahan wasn't smiling. He stared at the devastation, jaw tight. The flames reflected in his eyes, the sight both mesmerizing and horrific. They never stood a chance, he murmured. Haskins rested a hand on his shoulder. That's war, son. You don't ask for the breaks, you just take them when they come. The bombing subsided. Smoke curled skyward, blotting out the sun. The radio crackled again. Lucky 7, this is Falcon Lead. Target zone neutralized. All remaining German armor destroyed. You're clear to advance. Haskins keyed the mic. Copy that, Falcon lead. Beautiful work. Drinks on us if we live through this. The crew let out a few ragged laughs, the kind that came not from joy, but from pure relief. The tension broke, if only for a moment. As Lucky 7 rolled forward through the smoldering wreckage, the scene that unfolded before them was surreal, the forest reduced to blackened stumps, the road littered with burning hulks. Dozens of panzers, half-tracks, and trucks lay twisted and broken. Callahan's mistake, that single misplaced shot, had set off a chain of destruction that not even the German high command could have foreseen. One round had turned into a full-scale inferno. The radio came alive again with Allied chatter, voices cheering, reports of the enemy retreating, infantry moving in to secure the road. Ross looked around the turret, a weary grin spreading across his face. So, what do they call this one, Sergeant? The Battle of Callahan's Luck? Haskins chuckled. Nah. The brass'll probably call it something boring like Sector Charlie engagement. But us? He glanced down at the young gunner. We'll know what really happened. The Sherman continued down the ruined road, treads crunching over the ashes of what had once been a powerful Panzer Convoy. Callahan didn't speak. He simply watched the smoke drift upward, knowing that somewhere in that haze lay the line between accident and destiny. And for the first time since pulling that trigger, he understood what every soldier learns too late: sometimes, in war, the smallest mistakes make the loudest echoes. By dusk, the battlefield was silent. Only the occasional pop of exploding ammunition echoed through the charred forest. Smoke drifted lazily across the ruined road, settling into the craters like fog. The once vibrant woods near Lublin were now a graveyard of steel. Lucky 7 idled at the edge of the devastation, its olive-drab armor streaked with soot. The crew sat on the hull, helmets off, faces gray with exhaustion and disbelief. For hours they'd fought, fired, and survived on instinct, and now that the noise had stopped, the weight of it all began to sink in. Private Jimmy Callahan stared at the horizon, where the last of the smoke met the reddening sky. His hands still trembled faintly, though he didn't notice. Every time he blinked, he saw the flash, the shell leaving his gun, the tanker truck erupting, the world turning to fire. Across from him, Sergeant Haskins lit a cigarette with shaky fingers. The flame illuminated the deep lines etched into his face, grime filling every crease. "You did good today, kid," he said finally. Callahan shook his head. "I didn't mean to hit that truck." "Doesn't matter," Haskins said, taking a drag. "In this war, half the victories come from things we didn't mean to do." Nearby, the loader, Eddie Ross, kicked a piece of twisted panzer armor with his boot. "You know, I heard the radio boys say this convoy was carrying fuel for the entire 3rd Panzer Regiment. You didn't just blow up a few tanks, you stopped an entire offensive." Haskins smirked. "So that's what we'll tell the brass. One lucky shot, one fewer German division." The crew laughed, tired, hollow laughter that drifted into the night. A column of Allied trucks began to roll past them, headlights dimmed. Engineers and infantry picked their way through the wreckage, cataloging what was left. The smell of burned rubber and diesel hung thick in the air. One of the engineers paused near the Sherman. "You boys do this?" Haskins looked down from the turret. "Part of it." The engineer let out a low whistle, surveying the scorched valley. "Looks like the end of the world. Never seen anything like it." He shook his head, then added, "They'll be talking about this one for a long time." When the engineer left, silence returned. Only the faint chirp of crickets dared to break it. Callahan leaned back against the warm steel of the turret, eyes half closed. "You think anyone will believe it happened like this?" Haskins exhaled smoke into the dark. "Doesn't matter if they do. The war's full of stories like this, freak accidents, dumb luck, bad timing that turns out good. Most folks back home will never know half of it. He looked at Callahan. But you'll remember. And that's enough. The night deepened. A soft rain began to fall, hissing as it touched the still-burning wrecks. Tiny embers flickered like dying stars across the battlefield. The rain carried the smoke into the sky, washing away the ash but not the memory. Inside the Sherman, the crew finally powered down the systems. The gentle hum of the engine faded, replaced by the steady patter of rain on steel. Ross dozed off first, his head resting against a shell crate. Dorn sat quietly in the driver's seat, staring out through the slit window. Haskins leaned back against the radio, eyes closed. But Callahan stayed awake, watching the rain trace lines down the metal barrel of the gun that had changed everything. He thought about that first shot, the moment when he pulled the trigger, heart pounding, thinking he'd failed. He thought about the explosion, the inferno, the sudden turn of fate that no one could have planned. He didn't feel like a hero. He didn't feel lucky. Just grateful. As dawn approached, the first rays of sunlight cut through the lingering smoke, glinting off the destroyed convoy below. From above, it looked like a scar carved into the earth, a reminder of how fragile the balance of war could be. And though the official reports would later call it the Battle of Lublin Road, the men of Dog Company would remember it by another name, whispered half in jest, half in reverence. Callahan's fire. Because sometimes, in the madness of war, one man's mistake doesn't just change a battle. It changes everything.